Cam Newton, no doubt, was the best quarterback taken in the 2011 draft class. Cam Newton, no doubt, was an elite NFL player. Even with all that, his career would come to an end after 10 years. The major concern with Cam coming up in the draft was his issues off the field. With incidents at Florida, he transferred to Auburn. He'd have to play JUCO in 2009 after Florida. Then he wouldn't go to Auburn until 2010. Cam Newton was dominant, though, in that year. He'd rushed for 1,400 yards and passed for 2,800, had a total of 50 TDs, 20 of them were on the ground. And on top of this, he had only 7 picks. He won the Heisman that year and had one of the seasons to remember for a college player. Newton would be drafted 1 in 2011. He was seen as a lock at 1, and that held true come draft day. He was an elite athlete the moment he came into the league. Although totaling a high pick number, he passed for more than 4,000 yards and had 700 on the ground his rookie year. He had 21 passing TDs, and the high pick number was 17, and on the ground he rushed for 14 his rookie year. He looked a little better passing the ball, more fine-tuned next year, although less passing yards. He also had 5 less picks. He did pass the ball 30 times less factoring into this, but even with 30 more passes, I doubt he would have thrown 5 picks in those passes. But this was a solid step. He also had 2 less passing touchdowns, though. His rushing numbers were close to the same, except he had 6 less touchdowns. His record wasn't much better this year, but he looked more composed. It wasn't a major step, but he did tune his game some more. And we're going to go ahead and jump all the way to his MVP season, where Cam Newton would win the MVP in 2015. He passed for 3,800 yards and 35 touchdowns. He threw only 10 picks, and he rushed a little over 600 yards and 10 touchdowns. Panthers finished 15-1. Panthers did make the Super Bowl, where Cam Newton would famously not dive on a fumble, which people think that if he recovered, the Panthers could have won. This was Cam Newton's best year thus far, and he looked to build on it. Cam Newton was thrilling to watch like every other year, but especially this year. But after the MVP season, Cam Newton's career was mainly down. Newton struggled through injury in 2016, and the Panthers would miss the playoffs. And 2017 would be Cam Newton's last semi-healthy or close to fully healthy year. Panthers made the playoffs but had a quick exit, losing to the Saints in the wild card. This is the last season the Panthers have made the playoffs since, and Newton was good again that year. And in 2018, Cam Newton would go 6-8. Wasn't quite looking like Superman Cam. This is where the decline was basically fully in effect. Cam Newton's injuries were starting to pile up, and he didn't take enough time off to heal his injuries and was often rushed a bit back into it. And since 2016 to 18, he had suffered at least 4, bad injuries or bad enough injuries. And he wouldn't really adjust his play style to prevent these injuries and to make sure that they stopped happening. He didn't really dive or anything, and that's really what kind of held him back. 2019 would be Superman Cam's last season with the Panthers for now, and he'd sign with the Pats in 2020. His 2020 season with the Pats wasn't anything too good, though, although the Pats still managed to go 7-8 with him at the helm. In 21, the Pats had moved on from Cam, and Newton would end back up on the Panthers. Newton's time with the Panthers wasn't that great. Used really just as a gadget guy at first, but in 5 games started, Cam would go 0-5. His stats weren't impressive either. He passed for 684 yards, had 4 touchdowns, but 1 more pick. He was nice on the ground, though, with 230 yards and 5 TDs. And I think it's obvious what went wrong with Cam. It was the injuries. He had to have multiple surgeries, and it sucked. This was his downfall. Even in New England, it had caught up to him where he wasn't really a full QB there. It's also pretty obvious he wouldn't be a top 15 right now, like he claims in all these podcasts. Cam was fun, but it's obvious he can't play anymore, and he really couldn't since 2019. I think if he wasn't injured, we'd be talking Hall of Fame with him. Although this isn't the case, it's pretty fun to imagine.